The major Nazi generals were the top leaders in Adolf Hitler's military machine, standing at the very heart of the Third Reich's war effort. Their influence stretched far beyond the battlefield, shaping the destiny of nations and the fate of millions. They meticulously planned the battles, commanded vast armies, and enforced policies that would forever alter the course of World War II. Every decision they made rippled across continents, affecting soldiers and civilians alike. These men held power over millions of lives, wielding authority that could mean life or death for countless people under their control. Their decisions changed the course of history and brought unimaginable suffering to many. Cities were reduced to rubble, families torn apart, and entire communities erased by the consequences of their commands. But their stories did not end with the fall of Nazi Germany. As the regime crumbled, the world turned its attention to those who had orchestrated its horrors. After the war, the world demanded answers. It sought justice for the crimes committed and accountability for those who had led the Nazi war machine. The fate of these generals, how they lived, how they died, became powerful symbols of the struggle to understand and confront the darkest chapter in modern history. Some generals faced justice in courtrooms, standing trial for their actions before the eyes of the world. Some escaped into the shadows, vanishing into new lives, often aided by secret networks and false identities. Others, unable to face the consequences, chose to end their own lives as the war collapsed around them, leaving behind only questions and fragments of their stories. Each ending tells us something about the times and about the men themselves, their beliefs, their fears, and the legacies they left behind. Their stories are warnings and lessons for the future, reminders of the dangers of unchecked power and blind obedience. In this essay, we will explore the fates of these major Nazi generals, tracing their rise to power and their ultimate downfall. We will look at who they were, what they did, and how each met their end, whether in a courtroom, in hiding, or by their own hand. We will remember not only their power, but also their downfall, and reflect on the enduring impact of their actions on our world today. Wilhelm Keitel was Hitler's chief military advisor, a man whose name became synonymous with unwavering obedience to the Nazi regime. As the head of the Armed Forces High Command, Keitel signed countless orders, many of which directly led to war crimes and atrocities across Europe. His signature appeared on documents that shaped the course of the war and sealed the fate of millions. Keitel's loyalty was to Hitler above all else. He saw himself as a soldier first, bound to follow the commands of his leader no matter the consequences. He rarely questioned commands, even when they were cruel, illegal, or went against the basic laws of war. His willingness to obey, rather than challenge, made him a key enabler of Nazi policies. After Germany surrendered in May 1945, Keitel was swiftly arrested by the Allies. He was taken into custody as one of the highest-ranking officers of the defeated regime. He was put on trial at Nuremberg, the historic courtroom where the world demanded accountability from those who had led the war and committed unspeakable crimes. The court found Keitel guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity. He was held responsible for the suffering caused by the orders he had signed and enforced. He had signed orders for the killing of prisoners and civilians and for the brutal treatment of those under Nazi occupation. These documents became key evidence at his trial. Keitel accepted his fate quietly, showing little emotion as the verdict was read. He offered no real defense, claiming he was only following orders. On October 16, 1946, he was hanged along with other high-ranking Nazis convicted at Nuremberg. The executions marked a turning point in international justice. He was 64 years old at the time of his death, his face marked by the weight of his actions and the legacy he left behind. His death stood as a symbol of obedience taken too far, and the terrible price of following evil orders without question. Keitel's fate became a warning to future generations. Keitel's story reminds us that power comes with responsibility, and that those in command must always weigh their actions against moral and ethical standards. Blind loyalty can have terrible results, leading to destruction, loss, and suffering on a massive scale. The world saw in his trial and execution a lesson about the true cost of war, the dangers of unchecked authority, and the need for moral courage in the face of evil. Heinrich Himmler was one of the most feared men in Nazi Germany. As head of the SS, he built and ran the concentration camps. He created the secret police and planned the Holocaust. Himmler's name became linked with terror and death. In April 1945, as the war ended, Himmler tried to escape. He disguised himself and traveled across Germany, British soldiers caught him near Bremen. At first, they did not know who he was. After his identity was revealed, Himmler bit down on a hidden cyanide pill. He died, almost instantly, at the age of 44. Himmler never faced trial. He never answered for his crimes. His suicide was a final act of control, even as his world crumbled. Many believe he wanted to avoid shame and punishment. The story of Himmler's end is a grim reminder of how some tried to escape justice, but his actions and the suffering he caused can never be forgotten. Hermann Göring was rich, proud, and powerful. He led the German Air Force, or Luftwaffe, and was one of Hitler's closest friends. Göring loved luxury and fame. He helped create the Gestapo and took part in major decisions throughout the war. After Germany's defeat, Göring was captured by American troops. He, too, stood trial at Nuremberg. Göring tried to defend his actions, but the court found him guilty of crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. He was sentenced to hang. But Göring did not want to die by the hangman's hand. The night before his execution, he swallowed a cyanide pill in his cell. He died at age 53, cheating the noose. There are still questions about how he got the poison in prison. Göring's end was dramatic, fitting his larger-than-life character. His suicide denied the world the chance to see him punished in public, but his guilt was clear to all. Erwin Rommel was known as the Desert Fox. He won respect for his skill in battle, especially in North Africa. Rommel was not a member of the Nazi Party, but he served Hitler and became a popular hero in Germany and beyond. In 1944, Rommel was linked to a plot to kill Hitler. The regime turned against him. Faced with arrest and threats to his family, Rommel was given a choice: stand trial and bring shame, or take poison and protect his family's honor. He chose suicide. Rommel died on October 14, 1944, at the age of 52. The Nazis gave him a state funeral and lied about the cause of death. Only later did the truth come out. Rommel's story is different from the others. He was respected by friends and foes. His death shows the price even famous generals paid when they crossed the Nazis. Alfred Jodl was the chief of operations for the German armed forces. He worked closely with Keitel and planned many of the army's moves. Jodl was present at Germany's surrender in May 1945. Jodl was arrested and brought to trial at Nuremberg. The court found him guilty of war crimes, including the killing of hostages and the mistreatment of prisoners. He tried to defend himself by saying he only followed orders. On October 16, 1946, Jodl was hanged alongside Keitel and others. He was 56 years old. Years later, a German court cleared his name, but this ruling was not widely accepted outside Germany. Jodl's fate shows how staff officers, not just field commanders, were held responsible for crimes. His execution was seen as a warning to others who might use just following orders as a defense. Ernst Kaltenbrunner rose to lead the Reich Main Security Office, overseeing the Gestapo and concentration camps after Himmler. He was ruthless and feared, deeply involved in the machinery of terror. Kaltenbrunner was captured by American forces in May 1945. He faced trial at Nuremberg, accused of mass murder and crimes against humanity. The evidence against him was overwhelming, including documents and witness testimony. He showed little emotion during the trial. On October 16, 1946, he was hanged with other top Nazis. Kaltenbrunner was 43 years old. His execution was one of the first at Nuremberg, signaling that even the most feared would face justice. His story is a reminder of how the Nazi system depended on men willing to carry out evil plans without pity. The destinies of Nazi generals after World War II were as varied and complex as the war itself. Many of these men, once powerful figures in Hitler's military machine, met dramatically different ends in the years that followed. Some, like Friedrich Paulus, famously surrendered at Stalingrad, a turning point in the war. After his capture, Paulus became a vocal critic of the Nazi regime, even testifying against his former comrades at the Nuremberg trials. He spent his final years in East Germany, living out his days in relative obscurity. In 1957, he died, a free man, but forever marked by the choices he made and the history he witnessed. Others, like Walter Model, faced the collapse of the Third Reich with despair. When defeat became inevitable, Model chose suicide rather than surrender. In April 1945, he shot himself in a quiet forest near the Ruhr, ending his life as the Allies closed in. High-ranking officials, such as Alfred Rosenberg and Hans Frank, were captured, tried, and convicted as war criminals at the Nuremberg trials. Their crimes were deemed so severe that both were sentenced to death and hanged. Some generals, like Gerd von Rundstedt, were released from captivity due to failing health. He lived out his remaining years quietly, dying of old age, a stark contrast to the fate of many of his peers. The fates of these men were as different as their war records. Some faced justice, others escaped it, and a few simply faded away. There were also those who managed to evade capture for years, slipping through the chaos of post-war Europe and vanishing into new lives. Klaus Barbie, infamously known as the Butcher of Lyon, escaped to South America and lived under a false identity for decades. Eventually, he was tracked down, extradited, and brought to trial in France for his crimes. Barbie spent his final years behind bars, dying in a French prison in 1991, his past finally catching up with him. Yet, not all were found. Some Nazi war criminals simply disappeared, their fates lost in the confusion of the post-war years, their deaths unmarked, and their stories left unfinished. Each general's end tells a unique story of guilt, justice, escape, or quiet resignation. Some paid with their lives swiftly at the gallows, while others endured long years of guilt, legal battles, or lonely exile before meeting their end. The legacy of their actions continues to echo through history, a reminder of the consequences of power and war. The deaths of Nazi generals tell us much about justice, memory, and the search for truth. Some died by their own hand, trying to escape the world's judgment. Others faced courts, were found guilty, and were punished. A few lived on, left to carry the weight of their choices. Their endings show that power does not last forever. Even the most feared leaders can fall. The world learned the importance of justice through the Nuremberg trials. These trials set new rules for how to judge war crimes, so that such crimes would never be ignored again. Remembering these generals and their fates is not about honoring them, it is about learning from history. Their stories warn us what can happen when cruelty is given power and remind us to stand against injustice. In the end, the way these men died is part of the larger story of World War II. Their downfall is a lesson for all time. Justice and truth must always have the final word.